According to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, Notre Dame has the fifth best odds to make the college football playoff this season. So, is it CFP or bust for the Irish? All that and more on today's edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Wednesday, July 17th. And thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And as always, this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're on the move and you're listening to the podcast, please take a second, rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe there as well if you have not already. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. Really fun episode in store for you today. In just a moment here, I'm going to be joined by Tim Murray. Tim has been on the show before, although it has been a few months since the end of last season. Tim is the radio host for VSiN Live every day. He also has a college football betting podcast, and he's a diehard Notre Dame fan. We covered a bunch of different things in today's episode, including our level of optimism about the Irish heading into this season, Vegas odds and projections about the season win total, and specifically the season opener against Texas A&M, because Notre Dame is still an underdog on FanDuel right now by 1.5 points. So we cover all that and a whole lot more in today's conversation. Enjoy. All right, Tim Murray is back with me here, and it's been a long time. So first off, it's great to see you, and it means that football season is near. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks from now, Notre Dame will open up fall camp. So football season is close, and there's a lot of hope and optimism around the Notre Dame football program right now. But as you and I have discussed before, we do have a tendency to be a little bit pessimistic when it comes to our favorite teams. I would say for good reason, but how would you describe your level of optimism right now about this Irish team heading into 2024?
Yeah, man, it's pretty high. And I know right out of the chute, it is quite the challenge to go to, according to EA Sports, the most challenging environment in college football. But, I love where this team is at from a roster construction standpoint. I think offensive line is the biggest concern, which is kind of crazy to think about for most fan bases, for this fan base, I should say. But, last year, I think we discussed kind of the schedule and how it really, I remember thinking back to writing up Notre Dame for the VSiN college football betting guide. And I said, they will lose to either Duke or Louisville. I didn't know which one. And obviously it was Louisville.
It's almost both.
Yeah, it definitely was almost both. And this year you look at the schedule, and I'm not saying that it's, the easiest thing in the world, but I just think it sets up really well where you open the season at Texas A&M. Would you prefer maybe Northern Illinois be the opener and then Texas A&M? Yeah, I would say so. But I think the way it's structured, the fact that they have a bye week before Florida State, and Florida State, I believe their schedule is kind of tricky leading into that. I just, for me, getting Mike Denbrock to come in and having this continuity on the coaching staff, and Al Golden is not really flirting with other jobs, and he signs this extension. It just, the stability that there with this program right now is pretty exciting. I think you can nitpick anything. Obviously, Benjamin Morrison's health, I think, is a concern for a lot of people, including myself. But you look at the veteran nature of this defense. You look at what feels to be the buy-in from the administration and the NIL front. For the most part, and I know, once again, you go down the rabbit hole of, the recruiting right now and a couple of decommits and all of that. You're never going to be completely satisfied unless they're hoisting a trophy that, the one that Michigan was hoisting, not the one that they hoisted in El Paso. So I think for the most part, man, as a Notre Dame fan, and as you alluded to, one that tends to be more pessimistic than not, this is one of the highest I've been entering a season in quite some time. And, they've got to answer some questions. It's we could get into it, but it's kind of funny to think back to, you lose, an all-time player like Audric Estime. You lose, the highest draft pick, I think, since I want to say the early 90s with Joe Alt going 5th overall. And yet there's a level of optimism that is, I don't know if it's been there for quite some time, Tyler. So it's reflective of, I think, where this program is at and hopefully where it can get to, something that obviously we have not seen in, 35 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of things factor into it. The talent on the roster, big credit to Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff for accumulating so much talent and finding guys to replace the ones who left. Also, the schedule, I think, plays a factor into it. The fact that the college football playoff is now 12 teams as opposed to 4, and plus the stability with the coaching staff. Like, it all comes together and makes Notre Dame fans really excited about this upcoming season. And I think Vegas is also very high on Notre Dame as well. They have the 5th best odds to make the college football playoff on FanDuel right now. They're at -170. They're only behind Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, and Texas, so pretty good company there. But what I find interesting about all of this is that they are also underdogs against Texas A&M in the season opener. Right now, A&M is favored by 1.5. So I take that to mean Vegas projects that Notre Dame is going to lose in the season opener and then run the table the rest of the way because their win total is 10.5. Like, that seems pretty surprising to me. Most teams don't lose the season opener and then finish 11-1. But how do you see it? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not as black and white as you put it out to put it out there. But yeah, I mean, the market has kind of come back a little bit. It's pretty much a pick across the board at most shops, so it's a toss-up game. But Notre Dame is a favorite in every other game. Obviously, there's not a line for every single game, but they are in game of the year lines: a favorite against Louisville, a favorite against Florida State, and a favorite at USC. And every other game Notre Dame will be a favorite in. So yeah, I think, being a favorite in every single game is pretty rare. Ohio State right now is an underdog at Oregon, October 12th, and their win total is 10.5, and they're, I think, -600 to make the college football playoff. So, Notre Dame, it's just the way the schedule kind of plays out, where their perceived most challenging game is week 1 against Texas A&M. And, for me, from a gambling standpoint, I have not bet Notre Dame to make the playoff just because I don't really know how the committee is going to look at this team if they were to go 10-2. Obviously that would be very bad. And them not making the playoff would be, I don't know if I want to go disaster, but it would be really, really bad if this team, the way the schedule's set up, the veteran nature of this roster, the coaching staff's, price tag, and for them not to make the playoff. But yeah, I mean, that Texas A&M game, I mean, there's so many layers to it, Tyler. And, we're still 6+ weeks away from that game in College Station. But, you think about Mike Elko, you think about Colin Klein, you think about Riley Leonard, everything that is kind of incorporated into this game, and all the unique ties between this Notre Dame team and Texas A&M. But yeah, to your point about the win total being 10.5, and them being in some spots an underdog, it's just kind of the way the schedule breaks down. And we've seen the win total, if it opened 10, like at Circa here in Las Vegas, it's been bet to the over a little bit. So I've kind of gone about a unique way to look at the win total this year to kind of create my own kind of window of opportunity there for the Irish. But I think at the end of the day, Notre Dame probably will go off as a slight favorite. I do think, if I had to guess, the betting public will be on Notre Dame week 1, which always makes me worried.
Right.
It will be a ridiculous atmosphere. It's probably going to be muggy and hot, as we all know. But, Notre Dame will be a decent favorite, barring injury, in every other game after week 1.
I'm very nervous about the season opener, and a big part of that is the line. It's kind of like the stinky line theory. We're like, wait,
Sure.
how is Texas A&M favored against Notre Dame when I think most people would agree that Notre Dame has a better team? Now, it is at Texas A&M. I'll give you that, but also they have a first year head coach, I should say, not first time, in Mike Elko. They're breaking in a lot of new guys, so it's a really tricky game. So if you were to make the case for A&M, do you think that it has more to do with maybe Notre Dame struggles on the road, some uncertainty on the offensive line, or do you think that Vegas is a little bit higher on Texas A&M?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think the win total for Texas A&M is 8.5, and considering they play in the SEC, that's a pretty good win total. I mean, this is based off of power ratings, going to be a top 20, maybe top 15 team. I think defensively, they're going to be as good as Notre Dame faces, especially from a defensive line standpoint. And Notre Dame's going to have an offensive line out there that is going to be relatively untested with two new tackles out there. So, you look at that. I mean, I can make an argument that Notre Dame would prefer to play Texas A&M later in the season, but I can also make an argument, Tyler, that Notre Dame has them at a good time, right? I mean, I guess in a perfect world, this game would be at Notre Dame and not in College Station. But, at the end of the day, too, Notre Dame does have to play some road games. And the fact that this schedule shapes up with just 3 true road games and 2 of them happen in the first 3 weeks of the season from a schedule standpoint. I mean, look, Notre Dame has got and I know there are people out there that are, in my opinion, uneducated on the schedule strength that Notre Dame has played over the years. But for Notre Dame standards, man, this is one of the easiest schedules we've ever seen, where you've got 2 MAC teams, 2 teams from the AAC. You've got 3 true road games with Texas A&M, Purdue, and USC. I mean, from September 21st to November 23rd, they do not go to a hostile environment. That is pretty wild when you think about it that way. And who knows what LA is going to look like on November 30th. Notre Dame fans tend to show up. I will be there, or I'm planning to be there, Tyler. So, I think from that standpoint, you're feeling, pretty good. But I think I am nervous about that week 1 game. I do think it is a bit of a fishy line. I think, when we get to it, it's going to be decently public sided on Notre Dame, considering where Notre Dame will be ranked preseason in the top 10, and Texas A&M may or may not be a top 25 team. But Texas A&M is really good. They're loaded up in talent. They lost a lot in the portal, but they gained a lot. And you got to remember, Jimbo Fisher was recruiting at a record-setting pace down there in College Station. They lost some of that talent. Walter Nolan's on Ole Miss. Evan Stewart is up in Oregon, and there's some other pieces that left. But Mike Elko and his staff brought in some talent too. So yeah, by no stretch of the imagination is this Texas A&M team going to be a walkover. And I think that line is pretty indicative of that.
We'll be right back with Tim in a second to continue breaking down Notre Dame's upcoming schedule. But first, I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you about some really exciting stuff going on at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing quite like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Okay, I know it's a little bit early, and I agree that I'm a little bit biased on this selection here. But right now, the Cleveland Guardians have the 6th best odds to win the 2024 World Series, despite the fact that they head into the All-Star break with the best record in the American League. That's right. You can get the Guardians at plus 1,800 right now to win the World Series. And like I said, I'm a little bit biased. This is my favorite team, but I've watched a lot of their games in the first half, and I am very, very excited about what they can do in the postseason. Back in 2016, I was saying that they were going to make the World Series in the middle of the summer, and this year I'm saying the Guardians are going to do the same, and you can get them at plus 1,800. Great odds for you. That is my pick, and you can go on FanDuel anytime and continue to placing more fun bets like this one. Visit FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. My biggest concerns about that game has to do with the fact that Notre Dame was absolutely terrible on the road last year. Really struggled at Duke. just laid an egg against Louisville and Clemson. And even in the first quarter against NC State, like up until Audric Estime broke off that 80-yard run immediately following the rain delay, they didn't look good in that game either. And I know that, they've got Mike Denbrock coming in, and I think he's certainly going to help, but I don't think he's just going to wash away all of the problems that plagued Notre Dame on the road last season. I guess we're all hoping that Marcus Freeman sort of figured it out. Whatever it was that was holding the team back on the road, we can all hope that he figured out this season. But when I look at this schedule, you're right. It's definitely more favorable than it's been for Notre Dame in recent years. We've talked about A&M. We've talked a little bit about Florida State and how that's going to be a tough game. Are there any other games in the schedule that you could see as a potential trap game or just a tricky game? Because, like you said, you were on it with Duke and Louisville last year. I do think that there's probably a game, maybe two, where we're sweating out in the fourth quarter and thinking, how the hell is this even a game?
Yeah, that's college football for you. And this team, I think, will have those moments. Purdue's going to be weird. I do like the fact that it's a 3:30 game. They lost a lot of talent, including, their stud edge rusher Notre Dame will face in week 1 as opposed to week 3 in West Lafayette. The fact that Jeff Brom is not there anymore makes me feel a little better. But Purdue's got to be super up for that game. They're coming off a bye. So Notre Dame, I think, I think that game could be tricky. I'm not worried about Miami of Ohio, but it's just kind of a weird sandwich spot. Chuck Martin's squad is, preseason favorites to win the MAC. So, that could be one of those annoying games where, Miami of Ohio, I don't think it's going to be like Ball State in 2018 where, they've got a chance to actually win the game. But I think Miami could maybe hang around. And then I guess I would say Georgia Tech. You're looking at the schedule: Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy in October. They should be able to get up for it. But what's the atmosphere going to be like at Mercedes-Benz Stadium? It's probably going to be kind of sleepy. And, Georgia Tech's a team that with Haynes King, still playing college football, I think they've got a chance to score some points. But it's funny. You look around the ACC this year, and I know Notre Dame was supposed to play Miami of Florida. They're off the schedule this year. I mean, I look at that schedule, man, and I'm like, man, they could have got a couple of pretty scary teams from the ACC. Kind of like last year when Notre Dame got Duke, they got Louisville on the road. But the fact that a team like SMU or a team like Virginia Tech is not on the schedule this year, it just, you really have no excuses. At minimum, this team should be 10-2, and really, you gotta beat Florida State. I'm gonna pull up the schedule right now for Florida State. You're coming off of a perfect season, and this is the stretch that Florida State has going into Notre Dame. It's Clemson, bye, at Duke, at Miami, home to North Carolina, and then at Notre Dame in November. And Notre Dame's coming off a bye week where they would have played Navy in the Meadowlands, 2 weeks prior. So Notre Dame really has no excuse not to win that game. That's a kind of gotta have it type of performance. And credit Marcus Freeman and his staff. You talked about them laying eggs. They have, whether it was Clemson last year on the road, or obviously the most obvious ones being Marshall and Stanford in year 1, but. He has done a pretty good job of having this team ready to go, whether it was USC last year in prime time or Clemson 2 years ago in prime time. He's done a pretty good job of being ready to go. And the fact that you've got a bye week, you're at home, you're maybe in the elements, that's a gotta have type of game. And, who knows what the pressure is going to be like for Notre Dame. But, lastly, I'd say USC. That's an obvious one, but, USC, their win total's 7.5 this year, Tyler. Their schedule's pretty challenging. They open up against Brian Kelly here in Las Vegas on a Sunday night. They're a 6-point underdog in that game. They've got some big boys from the Big Ten, and it just feels like that has the makings of kind of the 2012 and 2018 Notre Dame USC games in LA, where it was just uncomfortable the whole way through. Notre Dame won both of those games, but it just feels like that game, Notre Dame more than likely will be playing for a playoff berth, and USC will not. and USC will just be out there trying to ruin Notre Dame's season. And that's going to be one of those games where the pressure is going to be completely on Notre Dame, and USC more than likely is just going to be playing to try to ruin their rival season.
Yeah, there's a good chance that USC heads into that game like 7-4, had some bad losses on the year, but part of that has to do with the fact that they have a really brutal schedule this season with LSU in the season opener, and then just a brutal Big Ten slate. But I agree with your point on them. I'm fully expecting there's a point in the Purdue game where I'm just like, this is painful to watch. And I think part of that just has to do with Notre Dame Purdue games in the past. They're almost never fun, especially when it's at Ross-Ade Stadium. So I think that one's going to be tricky. We haven't talked a whole lot about the Louisville game, and I'm very nervous about that game. I plan on going to that, so I'm excited about that, but I can't really get out the image from last season's game from my head. It was just so bad from beginning to end. And even though Notre Dame had a pretty good chance there in the third quarter before everything just kind of went to shit, like, I know that Louisville's a different team this year. I know that Notre Dame is different. The game is at home, but that game still really worries me. How do you feel about that matchup?
Look, I hope that you're wrong, because Notre Dame should have every ounce of motivation going into that game. The fact that they were thoroughly embarrassed last year on national television, you can debate what was their worst performance, Louisville or Purdue or Clemson. But that's a game that I hope I'm right, where I actually feel confident that they take care of business, that they're going to be locked in. They're going to be ready to go. It is a Peacock game, by the way, which is kind of the history on Peacock has not been great. Notre Dame all-time 0-3 against the spread on Peacock games, because it's usually the MAC game, or when they
The
played
Toledo
UNLV.
game was the first one.
Yeah, Toledo, and then it was Central Michigan last year, which wasn't really competitive, but they didn't cover, and then UNLV 2 years ago. But I hope that I'm right, and I'm just gonna chalk it up to, hey, you guys better take care of business here. This is a Louisville team that is not as good as last year. I don't think Tyler Shuck is as good as Jack Plummer, even though I don't think Jack Plummer is anything to write home about. And hopefully, the loss of Jawar Jordan, who might still be running against Notre Dame, is a big loss there for Louisville. But that's one of those games where if they're not ready and they struggle, that's going to raise some eyebrows for me. Like, what are we doing here? This team thoroughly embarrassed you, and now you're coming out like this. Now, I will say, my gut tells me there's going to be a whole lot of Louisville fans in that stadium. So that's always kind of an uncomfortable feeling. So hopefully Notre Dame fans, it's not going to be Notre Dame, Ohio State, which I was so impressed and so proud of the Notre Dame faithful for stepping up like they did. But don't overlook the Louisville game. All right. That's my PSA to Notre Dame fans, from the sense of get your ass to the game. I think the players should be ready, but be there. If you guys don't want to be there, I know the home schedule's not great. I get it. But, that's really the first big game of the year. You get two MAC teams. If you want to sell those tickets to Miami fans or whatever, show up for the Louisville game and keep that red out too. You kept the red out last year for the most part. Keep that red out as well.
Look, you got me fired up now, and I agree with you.
Like, what are we doing? Like, just don't just assume that only the Florida State game matters. Like, I think the players will be ready, but this is my PSA on a Notre Dame podcast. Show up for the Louisville game, because they're showing up. Like, those fans are not that far away. And, from all accounts, that environment last year was rocking for Notre Dame to be in town, prime time, return the favor and rock Notre Dame Stadium and keep them out.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. I do think that Louisville fans, the outside perspective on them is a little bit interesting, because there are certainly times where they don't show up for their team, but when they do, it's loud. And it was very loud last year. I remember in the lead up to that game, I remember telling people like, hey man, this is the biggest football game that Louisville has had in 5+ years. And I know that when Notre Dame played them in the season opener back in 2019, it was a pretty sleepy crowd. And a lot of people thought it was going to be the same thing. And then sure enough, it wasn't. And Notre Dame clearly was not ready for that crowd. I do feel a little bit better the way you put it, though. It is the first big home game for Notre Dame. I do think fans are going to show up and show out. And it should be a really fun game. But now, moving away from the schedule, going back to another big picture question here. You've been a diehard Notre Dame fan for a long time. What team does this current 2024 team remind you of? Because to me, it feels a little bit like 2015, where in 2014, they were on the precipice of winning a potentially program-shifting game in that game against Florida State that year. One play short, bullshit PI penalty. Then, the wheels completely fell off at the end of that season, but it does make you wonder, like, man, if they had beaten Florida State, would things have really gone that bad? Obviously a lot of that had to do with injuries, but then you look ahead to 2015, you're like, this team is loaded. They should be really, really good. And that's kind of how I feel about this team, because it's like, man, if they had beaten Ohio State last year, things would probably be really different. They weren't able to pull it out, but now they have a bunch of talent going into another season where the expectations are high, and they should be.
Yeah, I think 2015 is a really good one to compare it to. You win your bowl game against LSU. 2019 I think has some similarities to, or 2018, I beg your pardon, has some similarities. Huge game to start the season to open up that year, beating Michigan, and then I mentioned the Ball State and Vanderbilt game. That was when things kind of fell apart a little bit, but I look at that 2018 season. And hopefully, for the sake of not complete apples to apples, they don't have to make a quarterback change and Riley Leonard struggling to complete a forward pass. But I think about 2018, where College Game Day was on Notre Dame's campus for the Michigan game, and they win that game, and then you're like, whoa, all right, look at the schedule. Like this thing's shaping up pretty well, right? And they end up playing Stanford, but that Stanford team was pretty overrated. They go to Blacksburg, it's close, and then Dexter Williams breaks that long run, and then things were on, man. So I think either 2015 or 2018. I think back to the 2015 season, also a big time game to start the year. Taking on Texas and absolutely throttling them, and Malik Zaire, you're like, wow, here we go. Week 2 also the game that I attended, the Virginia game, where he breaks his leg, and you think the season might be lost, and they're able to figure it out. But yeah, I would say more 2018 than 2015, just because I guess we didn't know it at the time, but I have a lot more trust in the defensive coordinator from 2018 than I did in 2015, which is kind of the holdback there. But either one of those seasons, I think, are apt. 2006, man, there was so much hype, and I think we didn't know it at the time that roster was super flawed outside of the quarterback position and the skill positions. I mean, that team probably, to be honest, that Notre Dame team in 2006 is probably the most hyped preseason Notre Dame team we've seen, since maybe some of the early Lou Holtz years. Like, they were preseason top 5, maybe even some people thought.
I think they were top 2.
Yeah, I think some prognostications had them at 2. They beat Penn State, 41-17 before they, the wheels fell off against Michigan the following week. But I don't think the hype is nearly as high as it was in 2006. They didn't live up to that hype, obviously, in 2006, and they got their doors blown off in the Sugar Bowl by LSU. But I think, to me, either 15 or 18 are the ones I would compare it to. And I would lean a little bit more towards the 2018, as long as, once again, hopefully Riley Leonard doesn't get benched week 3 for Steve Angeli, because that was kind of a fun thing, though. When Angeli got benched, Notre Dame was when Wimbush got benched, it was kind of the belief, oh, man, Notre Dame's overrated. And Book just came in and lit up Wake Forest, a game I believe Sam Hartman played in.
Yep, it's a true freshman,
if my memory serves me correct. Yep. So yeah, that was a fun year. The Syracuse game at Yankee Stadium, where Notre Dame came out and absolutely pummeled Syracuse, and Dino Babers kicked a late field goal to avoid the shutout. So either one of those works for me. I guess more so 2018 because they did make the playoff that year. But yeah, I think the expectations and having a big game week 1 in 15 and 18 kind of gets the juices flowing like they do this year.
We talked a lot about the team as a whole, the schedule. Let's talk about the quarterback. Where are you at with Riley Leonard? I feel like every time I ask this question to a Notre Dame fan, I could get a completely different response.
Look, I'm super high on Riley Leonard. I think back to week 1 of last year, watching him perform against Clemson. And, before he gets injured against Notre Dame, you got to remember, I mean, he willed Duke to the lead, right? And Notre Dame hurt him on that last drive. He's got better weapons. I think what we've seen this offseason, outside of obviously the surgeries that worried you, he goes down to that Manning camp and he wins, best passer. I just think to some of the people that I trust, like a buddy of mine who works for Yahoo Sports, Nate Tice, he has him, Riley Leonard.
Nate loves him.
Has his top quarterback in college football this year. So I'm really high on Riley Leonard. And, you and I were texting back and forth when Parker got the Troy job. And, I was hoping a little bit more for Joe Moorhead, just kind of wishfully thinking. But look, Mike Denbrock is very, very, very good. Obviously, we learned that last year as he was a Broyles Award finalist and the architect of that offense down there in LSU. So I think the marriage of Riley Leonard and Denbrock is going to be fascinating. And, it's easy to say it now. And I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't. I was super hyped about Sam Hartman. But now, as I take a step back, Riley Leonard, when you look at his size, you look at his mobility, when you look at his upside, I'm more excited about Riley Leonard than I was Sam Hartman. And you also look at the weapons. Like Notre Dame, I thought Sam Hartman underperformed for the most part, but I also thought Notre Dame did not help him. I thought putting those wide receivers around Sam Hartman was not fair to him. And I think they recognized that and went out and added very well around Riley Leonard. When you think about, what they have in Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins, you bring back Jaden Greathouse, obviously, the emergence of Jordan Faison. Hopefully Jaden Thomas can stay healthy. And then you bring in Jaden Harrison, who I think most of us, when they announced that signing, it was like, all right, yeah, he's a good kick returner. And then you hear some of the reports out of spring. You're like, no, this guy's going to be a contributor in the slot. So this team's got weapons. I think the quarterback is better. I think he's got a higher upside. There was more production, obviously, from Sam Hartman, but I think this has been said before, but I felt like the ceiling was already reached for Sam Hartman, and I do not think that is true about Riley Leonard. So I'm really bullish on Riley Leonard, and if he can stay healthy, I think there's a chance that he could be in New York City in December.
Wow. Look at us, man. I'm almost nervous by how optimistic we are. This is an unusual feeling, I should say, but we have run out of time, and I know you have got a lot going on as we gear up for the football season, so please take this opportunity to plug everything that you're doing.
Yeah, check out the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast and VSiN Primetime, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, YouTube TV. You can stream it for free on VSiN if you just want to listen to the audio. This is my parting gift to you, Tyler. So I kind of created my own Notre Dame win total bet. So for those who are new to gambling, juice is what you have to pay the house. So normal football games, Notre Dame week 1 against Texas A&M, the juice is -110, meaning you put in, from a fractional standpoint, $11 to win $10, $110 to win $100, however you want to decipher it, right? So what I did was, there are a couple different shops with win totals, and you alluded to Notre Dame being 10.5 plus money to the over, and then you could also play exactly 10 wins. So not to get too complicated, but I played both of those, and I created an over 9.5 win market at around -200. So there's a podcast that I spent a couple weeks ago. You could check it out on the VSiN College Football Betting podcast feed that I did a whole deep dive on Notre Dame and how I'm looking to bet them. So I think if this team doesn't win 10 games, it's a massive failure, and it raises some eyebrows about the future of Marcus Freeman. So I'm optimistic. I think this is an 11-win team. I think the floor is 10 wins, and I think they take care of business. And hopefully, come mid-December in a chilly South Bend, we're talking about a playoff game. So hopefully that's the case. But yeah, man, optimism's high, and to your point, it does scare me a little bit how optimistic I am entering this year.
All right, man. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the betting advice. You're getting us all rich here, so we can all appreciate it. We'll have to do this again soon.
At the end of the season, or save the angry tweets till the end of the season.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I will be back with you tomorrow morning. And here's a reminder, another mailbag episode is coming your way on Friday morning. If you want to be featured on that show, please send in your thoughts, your questions, anywhere you want. You can drop them below in the YouTube comments, or you can send them in on social media. The Twitter account is @LockedOnIrish. Instagram is @LockedOnIrishPod. Feel free to @me, DM me, whatever you choose if you want to be featured on the show. Also, please remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.